People's Progressive Party welcome you to this very national forum where we are discussing many issues affecting the lives, welfare, and general operation of our country today. The issue of discrimination and marginalization is not limited or exclusive to an ethnic group. It goes far beyond that. It goes into the political dimension of our society. Marginalization and discrimination based on political views. But what is more important and sensitive in a society like ours is when we have policies formulated by discriminate in the way formulated. And we have many examples over the last few months that can point you into a direction where the policy of government has led to the feeling and the fact of marginalization and discrimination. If you take your approach to sugar, your approach to rice, your approach to the Amerindians, your approach to social safety nets, your approach to social programs, and the general lack of consultation, lack of dialogue with the wider society and the opposition as a whole, has led many to firmly believe that we are heading down a dangerous path of marginalization and discrimination. And in the diaspora, we are also seeing many questions being raised about the militarization of the state. And this is another important issue that we have to address, where many senior civilian posts, public service posts, are now being filled by former military or military officials. So I think to stem this tide and to send a strong message in our society, we needed to have, at the highest level of leadership across the country, civil society and political leadership, a message and a forum that could adequately discuss these issues. And today we have such a forum. My job is a very simple one, and that is to present these distinguished figures who would have contributed differently in different aspects of civil society life, political life, economic life, social life in our country. And the first person I have to introduce to you is Mr. Harmon, who is representing the civil society. And I'll now ask him to take the floor and make his presentation.
With my busy schedule, managing that time of the month could be very challenging. With Protex cotton surface pads, I'm dry and clean for 10 hours. With Protex, I feel relaxed and confident with their absorption, leak lock protection, odor control, and thermal technology. Protex, the protection, care, and comfort you can always depend on. Take advantage of the extra savings with 10 extra panty liners when you purchase 1-pack Protex pads. Be sure to ask for Protex pads. Enjoy the comfort and savings. Distributed by Superfoods. Call 223-1034 or 223-1035.
The entire question of discrimination and all of that, marginalization, and they're very critical issues. They need to be carefully diagnosed. One of the problems in this society is that we don't do the diagnosis correctly. And because we don't do the diagnosis, we never get the solution to the problem. But we have to do the diagnosis correctly. If we do the diagnosis, we'll get the solution. But I want to start with what they call it militarization. I think it's on the agenda. what they call the militarization of the society and the placement of military officers in public service positions. Now this has not started now. This process of putting military men in the public service did not start with the administration headed by the military man. It started before. But what we have seen is an acceleration of this process and a greater volume of military people being placed in civilian positions. Now, generally speaking, merely because a person served in a military position does not preclude him from moving on to a civilian position. We have many cases like that. That immediately comes to mind. I would say the person that comes to my mind, of course, is Winston Moore, who was a military man, and he went to the court and the law, and then he went to the ombudsman. Clarissa Real, who was a military lady at one time, she's now High Commissioner in Ottawa. There are many people who served in the military and went into civilian life. Mr. Justice Patterson Reynolds, and so on. The problem, the real problem is that when you parachute these guys into position and you deny other people the job that they're supposed to get. That's the real problem. It is not that being military by itself per se precludes you from getting a job in the civil society. It is when you brought in, very often retired, or you parachute. I think some of these guys came from the parachute regiment. I think Nanda would know that. When you parachuted into a job and you prevented someone who's supposed to get a job, would be promoted for that job from applicants. That's where the big problem lies. But as a general rule, the mere fact that a person served in the military should not necessarily be an obstacle to him or her operating in civilian life. Especially if they've been here all the time and they move from military to the law and wherever and so on, and they move up, like Mr. Justice Moore, the ombudsman, and so on. It is when we hear that these retired gentlemen are being brought into the system. Luncheon did speak about that on the eve of the last election. I don't think many people paid a lot of attention to him at the time. I hope today they pay more attention. But as I want to finish on that subject, my preliminary remark is that the mere fact that one may have served in the military is not necessarily sufficient to preclude them from operating in civilian life. Our Constitution provides for what is the Public Service Commission to recruit people into the public service. We have that in the Constitution. I think it's 200. And you have to come through the system. You have to compete for the job. It has to be transparent and all that. And if you're the best candidate, I guess, there's no reason why you shouldn't get the job. But that's not what's happening here. That's not what's happening here. We have to make sure that the Public Service Commission is functioning the way it's supposed to function in the Constitution. 200, I think it is. Then we come to the question of the economic, what's called marginalization here. Harmon talks about rice and sugar. Sugar is still getting a lot of support. Sugar is still getting a lot of support, although I noticed that the union continues to protest the closure of Wales, which is still problematic, and that has to be addressed. I don't know how they'll address it. My own view is that something needs to be done about Guyana. Guyana is a bankrupt institution. The Parvatan report said that they owe $82 billion. I don't know how much more you can continue giving them the money, but the problem here with Guyana, the government has not been able to formulate any sensible thing of what to do with these people that you want to dislodge from their job. They have not been able to formulate anything. I understand Minister Fulda, he's talking about doing goat milk. Can you imagine this guy? He wanted to do goat milk at Wales, and Tony Blair is doing tilapia. I think he got 3 dozen now at Wales. A lot of foolishness we're hearing. We're hearing a lot of foolishness, but no real solid plan what to do with these people when you want to restructure this company. And that is the main problem here in sugar. It has to be addressed. I think there's nothing to prevent the opposition party, who's more knowledgeable in this whole idea, from putting forward a definitive plan what to do with this thing. But it hasn't been done as yet. And we know the problems with rice. We know the problems with the economy. The minister's talking a lot about gold and oil and all of that, all foolishness. The economy is on a downward trajectory. It has been for a long time. And we're not hearing or seeing any plans to reverse this trend. And it is my considered opinion that in the absence of any serious plans to reverse this trend, the economy will continue to slide. You look at all the numbers. Of course, you get a lot of wrong numbers nowadays from these people. The international reserve is below 600 million, I think, for the first time. The growth rate is low, and the growth rate is a mathematical thing based on all this gold that is produced by the Australians and Canadians that have done to do with the economy. So that's a problem. The numbers the ministry gets out. A lot of it makes no sense to me. So we have to look at that. I'm not seeing any plan to reverse this downward trajectory on the economy. Everybody waiting for oil. I don't know when that's going to happen. Oh. If it's 5 years, I tell you, but I think even when it comes, we'll get nothing out of it. That's my opinion. We'll get like what the Nigerians get out of British petroleum there. We'll get nothing out of it. Let me tell you that. And then the question of, I see it's witch hunting they call it. Witch hunting is a political word that Clement likes. This whole question of changes in government. When new government comes to power, they change around a lot of these people. We have to look at that. We have to look at that. Some of it might be necessary. Some of it might be sheer wickedness. I've gone through that experience myself years ago. I came back in '67 from the Soviet Union. The government had changed. Couldn't get a job for 9 years. 9 straight years. I left in '76. After that, a lot of discrimination. Who's saying you? PPP saying you? PNC in power. Who's saying you? Who in power? All foolishness, nonsense. And remember when I man out in Toronto, he couldn't get a job. He sent by the PNC, came back. Gary, you got to put lunch and now. Can't get a job. Who send you? Who bring you? And I told Rick now to go to the GEC and start work as an engineer and stop all this nonsense because I'd gone through that thing myself for a long time. And I could have empathized with him right away. And I know he's looking for, he used to come every day to see that, not getting any sleep. And the same problem, we have some comers coming back from Cuba. Who send you, who bring you out? It's all nonsense. All nonsense. That here is a country that needs technically trained people, educated people, and you keep pushing them around all the time. We cannot accept that. We have to fight it with all the energy we could command. I'll stop there for the time being.
Eat fresh at Subs and Salads today. Over 12 tasty sub sandwiches to choose from. All the favorite fillings and toppings you can possibly think of. Made fresh every day. Personalize yours today. Our footlongs are a treat. More meat, more toppings on a well-baked bun. Our Caesar salads are amazing with the best ranch dressings. So let your next stop be Subs and Salads on Sheriff Street, Regent Street, and Grove on the east bank of Demerara. Subs and Salads. Eat fresh.
Commodore Fan, comrades of the head table, comrades and friends, my presentation will concentrate on witch hunting, the institutionalization of witch hunting, specifically targeting the leadership of the PPP and former ministers and senior functionaries of the past administration. To put my presentation into context, it is necessary that I situate a few points at the outset. You will recall that the major plank of the platform, election platform of the coalition government was corruption. They led their supporters, and indeed many people in the diaspora, to believe that there was massive, rampant corruption in government. And they made promises that they will prosecute for corruption, and that galvanized a lot of their supporters' imagination. When they assumed government, as you know, they were unable to find this massive corruption. Not satisfied with all the information that they had available, still they were unable to find this corruption. And then they began to employ forensic auditors, etc., etc. And they have, up to now, they have been unable to unearth this massive corruption that they spoke about. The pressure is building upon them, and they are losing credibility in the process. Hence, they have embarked upon a course of activities to establish a series of agencies and institutions which they are staffing with their own people, removing them from the independence that they would normally enjoy, and moving away from the conventional constitutional institutions that are assigned certain responsibilities. They are creating their own parallel organizations, and they are using those organizations to achieve this preconceived objective. And it is against that backdrop that my presentation is situated. My presentation is titled "The Systematic Dismantling of the Constitution and the Rule of Law." Countries in the English-speaking Caribbean are often described by constitutional theorists as constitutional democracies. This is so for many reasons. Their constitution is their supreme law. It creates their systems of government and invests it with powers to govern the state and limit those powers. It determines who will govern and how they will govern. It creates and regulates the relationship between the state and the citizenry. It confers certain obligations on the state, and it imbues the citizenry with certain rights and freedoms. It determines how the state raises funds and how it will account for the expenditure of those revenues. It sets out how laws are made and by which institution they are to be interpreted and enforced. It creates a series of institutions which acts as checks and balances against abuse of power, and through which the state is to be held accountable for its actions in order to ensure that there is good government, good and democratic governance in accordance with the Constitution and the rule of law. Guyana is one of those territories. Interwoven in this constitutional fabric are several institutions which are structured, designed, financed, and constituted in such a manner that they enjoy considerable functional autonomy and independence in the discharge of their individual mandates. And they are strongly insulated from any form of influence, in particular from the executive. These institutions include, but are not limited to, the judiciary, the Office of the Auditor General, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Guyana Police Force. It is the judiciary which the Constitution ascribes the exclusive responsibility to interpret and uphold the Constitution and the laws, to strike down unconstitutional laws and condemn unlawful executive actions and abuses, to determine disputes between the citizenry and the state and among the citizenry themselves, and to impose sanctions on those who violate the law. The independence of the judiciary is zealously guarded in the Constitution by a series of mechanisms. Its officers are appointed by a special process. They are conferred with strong security of tenure. Their remuneration package cannot be altered to their detriment. they are financed by a direct levy, the consolidated fund. Office of the Auditor General, by virtue of the Constitution, deemed independent that of the judiciary. Its core functional responsibility is to exclusively audit the state receipts and expenditure of public funds. It prepares and presents annual audited financial statements in relation thereto to the National Assembly for its scrutiny. The Director of Public Prosecution is another institution which enjoys similar constitutional independence. Its main function is to advise the state on criminal matters and to institute and undertake, take over and continue or discontinue criminal proceedings against any person before any court in respect of any offense against the laws of Guyana. The functional independence which the DPP enjoys can be gleaned from the language of Article 187(4) of the Constitution, and I quote, "In the exercise of the powers conferred upon him or her by this article, the director shall not be subject to the direction or control of any person or authority." The Guyana Police Force is the institution vested with the exclusive power to investigate and prevent criminal conduct and to generally maintain peace and public order. The force's independence is manifested in the way its officers are appointed, promoted, disciplined, and removed from office. More significantly, the force is superintended by a commissioner of police who has exclusive responsibility in respect of management and administration of the force and over operational matters, to the exclusion of the executive government. The governmental officer who holds ministerial responsibility in respect of the police force can give directions in relation to policy matters only. The above exposition is but a fleeting glance at the length to which the framers of the Constitution have traveled to alienate from executive government certain responsibilities and to reside them in independent, autonomous organizations, and then insulating these organizations from executive influence. These complex and multiple constitutional mechanisms were created for one purpose only, that is, to create a system of checks and balances to avoid the abuse of power by the executive. I will now show you how these institutions are being undermined. The coalition government over the last year has embarked upon a deliberate and centrally orchestrated course of action to persecute and witch hunt ministers and officials of the PPC administration in order to prove that their widespread allegation of corruption, However, they need the blind loyalty of the aforementioned institutions in order to succeed. Thus far, apparently, they have been unable to penetrate the cloak of independence which the aforesaid institutions enjoy. In consequence, we are witnessing a clear and consistent strategy to avoid the engagement of these institutions. Again, the response from the police and the DPP has been disappointing to those who already sharpened their political hatchets. The situation is exacerbated by every passing day because it results in considerable damage to credibility. After all, they have intoxicated their supporters with the propaganda that the PPP administration is guilty of massive corruption in office. But after 1 year in complete control of the government and the state machinery, they are unable to prefer any serious charges. Not being able to exert the type of pressure and influence over the police force and the DPP as they would like, because of the constitutional and institutional installations to which I have referred above, greater reliance is now being placed upon SARU and SOKU, two organizations that are politically staffed and directed to conduct investigations with the hope that they can find, or I dare say, manufactured the required evidence. Yet, the desired results are not forthcoming. In the meanwhile, the crescendo of frustration and desperation continues to build. As a result, laws and protocols are being drafted to strengthen and enlarge the powers of SARU and SOKU. Recently, there has been an expressed intention to, I quote, establish a special prosecutor's office. The obvious objective is to circumvent the DPP, or at least to emasculate that office of the autonomy and independence guaranteed to it by the Constitution. I have no doubt that we will soon hear about the establishment of special courts where these charges will be heard and determined. Let me now make the picture clearer. The government is handpicking its own auditors and directing them who, what, and how, and where to audit. When these audit reports are completed, they are then sent to two political outfits masquerading as law enforcement agencies, SARU and SOKU, which are being directed who and what to investigate. When these investigations are concluded, the findings will be sent to a special prosecutor's office for legal advice. This will be an office that will be staffed by the government with its cronies. Charges will be instituted and will be prosecuted by these persons who are all politically tainted. The charges will be heard and determined by these special courts, which I anticipate will be established and which will be presided over by magistrates in whom the government resides great confidence. That the decisions will be perverse, I am in no doubt. In conclusion, the Constitution and the rule of law are under siege. Authoritarianism is building a formidable foundation. Today, the target is the PPP leadership and its supporters. Tomorrow's victim will be you. It is the natural evolution of a dictatorship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Nandlal, for that elaborate presentation situating the situation within the ambit of the Constitution and showing how institutions that are safeguarded by the Constitution are being affected by the actions of the government. I'll now introduce you someone who had a lot of experience working with military personnel in the security sector, as he was a former secretary to the Defense Board, and perhaps one of the most fitting persons to deal with the issue of militarization that's existing within our society. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Roger Luncheon.
Superfoods assures the best quality corn and mixed vegetables. Our decade of experience and reliability certainly will help your cooking experience. Our farm fresh corn and mixed vegetables are always picked at prime season and canned to perfection. Once you taste Superfoods corn and mixed vegetables, you will know the difference. Superfoods corn and mixed vegetables, highest quality at the lowest price. Call Superfoods today. Located at 8 Rumfeld Industrial Estate, Georgetown. Call 223-1034 or 223-1035.
And that more so is perhaps a reflection of 23 years in government. I think an honor that Raymond did not enjoy. But government, the opportunity this afternoon that has been presented allows me to dwell on matters I spent considerable time commenting on radio, television, and particularly since May of 2015 on the radio program I host, Luncheon on Government. The point that I think we need to concede tonight is, given the change in government, one, and given the deterioration in our economy, a sensible government, a caring government would avoid certain types of engagements. And this Granger administration, a point that I have made recurrently, this Granger administration seems to be above, aloof, indifferent to these concerns. One has to do with the very nature of the wrongdoing and the administration's responses. I think most of us would agree. They have the wrongdoings, they have continued relentlessly. But worse yet, despite public opinion, despite the administration knowing that the public knows and advising them that it is a known fact, this relentless, this obsession with continuing on the same road. How could it be explained? How could it be explained that confronted with public opinion and evidence consistently pointing to wrongdoing, examples litter the landscape, the behavior continues? Essentially saying to Guyanese, take it, stuff it. You can't stop us. And his remarks about authoritarianism resonates. This is the behavior of a government don't care and do the best you can. And one of them we have to pay for because it comes home day after day, and this is the denial of information, the denial of a constitutional right to know and an obligation on the government to inform. We don't know. As Raymond said, many things are unknown, suspect. The willingness of the administration to address in a comprehensive and indeed in a credible way the concerns of Guyanese in all spectra, all stakeholders, it just isn't there. What we are fed with is pure propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, but fundamentally the denial of information. I put it to you, if you want to establish an authoritarian state, one of the pillars of its foundation is this denial of information. You will be denied, you will be told, misinformed, and your ability to give serious consideration to the facts that are being presented to you without indeed be influenced negatively by this lack of information. I think we have to keep focusing on these aspects of poor governance that the administration, notwithstanding public opinion, that this administration seems recklessly adhering to. to say a few words about the military and the militarization. I think that we have to situate this aspect of militarization with the history of the military in Guyana. It is a point that I've made, as Harmon said earlier, and perhaps indeed not much attention was paid to it. But we cannot abandon what transpired in the past and gave us some idea, presented a framework for looking at our military. 23 years later, obviously, we have failed to inculcate in the military itself and in military traditions. I remember in 2014, 2015, the then Chief of Staff and I exchanged contrasting views. I said, how could a Chief of Staff one day after demitting office turns up in active politics? I said in many democracies of the world, there are either protocols prohibiting such or common sense will tell you that it is not advisable. When one thinks one day after being the Chief of Staff and the influence on those officers and ranks who have been served with you, the election to go in politics, see democracy ought never to have happened here in Guyana. That is the background. It is not only that, it's also, as Raymond said, financial. Many of these retired officers are already benefiting from a rather generous program. The Pension Act is indeed, for the military, quite different, more generous. I think I must say, other than the politicians, elected politicians, the military, they reign supreme in terms of their access to the public funds through their superannuation benefits. And these are the same people who are being injected, re-injected in many cases, and excluding, as Harmon pointed out, many other Guyanese deserving who are seeking more. The presidency can't discriminate against them. Obviously, given a choice, who to discriminate against, the average Guyanese would and are the ones that are excluded from getting access to these privileged posts that the retired military officers and ranks are receiving right now. It is in the context of our history. It is in the context of what the military has over the centuries, over the decades in the civilized world, their traditions and our examples, what happened since the creation of the Guyana Defense Force, and a history that Guyanese people have not lost. An insensitive act, I insisted then in 2014, 2015. And I felt reassured when the then opposition leader, Mr. Granger, and even when he became the president, spoke of returning the military to their barracks. 180
180 degrees about turn. And we are seeing what we are seeing today. There is so much that this regime has to answer for. The basis, the reasons for these about turns from being in the opposition to now being in government. But the end result I'm saying to you this evening is that it has been a feature of all of the poor governance practices that have befallen this land, this Guyana. And that is what we have to concentrate on. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luncheon. I think this is a good time for us to introduce the General Secretary of the PPP, who has been speaking on these issues quite consistently and has a lot of examples of persons who are actually discriminated against and victimized against. So now I will introduce Mr. Clement.
Have you tried a new taste of Western fried chicken lately? Added flavor, marinated with rich seasonings and fresh ingredients, pressure fried to lock in the taste. Western fried buffalo wings, chicken strips and more, so take a bite into the good stuff today. Three convenient locations to serve you. Call the numbers on your screen for home delivery.
Batting order number 4. I would wish to add my contribution to what was said, not only by the previous speaker, but what the public outside here is talking about. Because it is important to understand and to appreciate public sentiments in a situation where just almost 1 year after being in government, tons of people feel a sense of marginalization and feel a sense of being displaced economically, socially, and culturally. Now, each of the subjects that we have listed here for discussion, taken together, not individually, but taken together, indicates that this country is moving in a particular direction. And what we are witnessing here are merely the manifestations of a direction in which this country is moving. We've been there before. We have been there before. And Mr. Granger has made no bones over the fact that he is continuing from his godfather and his mentor, who died in 1985, and is carrying on with the same journey today. If you examine very closely the measures that Mr. Granger is taking and the policy that he's adumbrating, he just brought back a man who lived for years in Washington to carry out a commission of inquiry into the National Service, into the People's Militia, and into retired soldiers. these steps. And I don't wish to repeat what other comments have said. The placing of military men in key positions, key and critical posts. They must be aimed at some objective. What is the objective? I do not believe that these measures and these steps are being taken by someone just waking up and saying, well, look, we have a man here, why don't we put him there? I believe, and I don't want to be too generous to these people, but at the same time, you can neither overestimate or underestimate what their plans are. I believe it is part and parcel of a strategy. But what is the objective of this strategy? And this is what I believe we need to begin thinking about. Because this is all about the future of our country. This is about the future of our children. This is about the future of the young people. What does the future hold for them under the Granger administration? Knowing fully well the issues that have surfaced today, which we have no other but to oppose and fight against. There was experience in the past where we saw these things taking place. And it took a long time before people began to mobilize and to organize to oppose them. Having learned from those lessons, I believe that we must recognize these events for what they are and take steps to oppose them. You walk around this country, almost every single one you speak to, every single Guyanese you speak to, they complain about things being bad. And there's no doubt about the fact that it is the government that is responsible for what is taking place in our country. What is regrettable about this whole thing is that not only will the politicians in the PPP be targeted and be caught up in what is called the Operation Dragnet, but there are many innocent individuals who will not only be tainted, but will be caught up in this situation. And that is why it is important for every single one of us to be involved. Because, as you know, today it could be for me, tomorrow it can be for you. And therefore, we have to ensure that there's a tremendous amount of unity in confronting this problem. I agree that we are moving inexorably towards a command-type police state. It is there before our very eyes. And what the government, what the Granger administration is seeking to do, they're trying to make us become comfortable, make it appear as acceptable. This is a type of psychological warfare that they're waging against the Guyanese people. Accept a military individual in one position or the other. It is normal. And the moment we become complacent and accept that, okay, as Mr. Granger said, they're human beings too, but so are civilians. Civilians are human beings too, and they may be just as well as better qualified for the jobs. So, I think the objective is clear. There are some still among us, even though we had warned before the 2015 election, He's warned that the handwriting is on the wall were these individuals to take office. Now, many people are beginning to recognize, some who voted are beginning to recognize the mistake they made. So before too late becomes the crime, let us take action on this matter. In the past, Burnham government sought to institutionalize the party, which became known as paramountcy of the party. This time, it is institutionalization of the military. This must mean something. Why are they doing this? Is it because Granger is a former military man and therefore he feels comfortable with his colleagues holding these positions? That may very well be true, but what does it mean for the country? I recently read a statement where Mr. Granger, on the occasion of the death of the founder leader, said that it was the PNC and Mr. Burnham who brought peace out of the chaos. That it was Mr. Burnham who was the architect of social cohesion. Social cohesion that is now being practiced by many who you know by the name of Miss AA. But how could we achieve social cohesion at a time when thousands of people are being marginalized and they're attacking the PPP? Are even attacking the business community and to some extent the trade unions. The first step that was taken to destroy social cohesion was on May the 15th, 2015. That was the first step to destroy any genuine effort at social cohesion. They drove a nail in the coffin of social cohesion. And then they pretended, subsequently, that they're walking towards social cohesion at a time when thousands upon thousands of people feel marginalized. But this social cohesion, if I may point out, is only aimed at a particular section of the population. Aimed at a particular section of the population. Socially cohering a section of the population with certain objectives in mind. And what is the objective? The fundamental objective is political power. All the efforts of social cohesion is aimed at maintaining and finding ways and means of them maintaining themselves in office. And that is another challenge that we have to watch for. That is another challenge. So, my friends, let us be vigilant. Let us keep our eyes and our ears open. And all these negative trends that we're seeing occurring now in the country. And let us agree, like thousands have said outside this country, inside this country, clearly as the night follows the day, what they experience under the PDPC is nothing compared to what they're experiencing now under the APNU AFC. So experience sometimes could be a good teacher. And it could be very well, it could be that very experience that will result in two things. One, the demise of the present government and the return of the PDPC to office. Thank you very much.
Superfoods brings quality dairy to your home. The highest protein and the creamiest taste with calcium and vitamins A, D, and E. Keep your family smiling with our full cream Milko milk powder made from 100% pasteurized milk. Our Milko milk powder is high-quality Fonterra milk powder, now available in smaller packages. Enjoy the high quality and great taste. Call Superfoods, located at 8 Rumfeld Industrial Estate. Call 223-1034 or 223-1034.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kamal. All these topics that we have here tonight are interrelated to each other. They have a direct link with each other. And I suppose that is why those who organize this forum pick these topics as they are. And I would like to say that one of the first things we have to look at is what is the nature of this government? Who do they represent within our society? And very clearly, this government is a throwback to the PNC government that came to an end in 1992. It is the same characterization of the state that we're having here again, where we have a bureaucratic capitalist class in power. What do I mean? They're not the typical business people who establish a business and run it, make their profit and make their money. These are people who use the state institution as an instrument of enriching themselves. And everything that we have seen over the last year points to the fact that this elite uses this state. This is the kind of class nature of the state that we have. And when you combine that with the military aspect that the comrades have been speaking about, you know, we have some uniqueness in Guyana. I remember one time listening to a speech about Walter Rodney was making at the street corners, when he said that the Barnum, in the various parts of the world where you have coup d'etat, the general seizes the power and then becomes president. In Guyana, Barnum seized the power by rigged election, and then he became general. Well, it's the same thing that we're having here now. We have a strongly, heavily influenced military state in place, where if you look right now at the office of the president, they have well over 20 military men in the office of the president. And in every ministry of the government, you have military people. And they have been using military organization. The militarization didn't only start with the militarization of the state came about as a result of the militarization of the PNC itself. The fight with Granger and Greenwich, that was a fight with the civilian part of the PNC with the military part of the PNC. That was the struggle that you had there. And the Granger part of the PNC, that he successfully became, used, first of all, as a pool to recruit from the military people who they've come about. And that was very easy. Why? It was easy for them to do that because historically, the army was not a Guyana army. This army started out as a PNC army. It was created in the image of the PNC. The leadership of the army had to go and swear loyalty to the government and go to the Congress and swear loyalty. Barnum publicly said the party in power, for him, loyalty must be to him and to the PNC. So they had a pool of people that they could recruit and work on, and they used in the whole elections campaign itself, they used a lot of military methods in the local politics. One of the features of militarism is disinformation, creating disinformation. And I must say that they succeeded very well in creating the impression of the type of corruption in the state. That is why when Anil Nandalal spoke just now and made the point that even after 1 year, they can't come up with any substantial evidence to back their claim about corruption within the society. But they did succeed in making people, together with the local, some of the local anti-PPP media, they did succeed in creating that impression in people's mind about the level of corruption in our society. And if you really go and examine the facts, you will see how much the PPP did in order to try to democratize the life, transparency, openness. Now in government, the military doesn't know what is democracy. The military operates top-down by command type. And that is what is taking place in our society. Only last night or the night before the last in Parliament, the comrades were speaking about a certain house that becomes suddenly a drug barn. And it was not publicly advertised. Nothing was publicly advertised. And many, many instances of that already in only 1 year. We have an abundance of those things where people are going and doing single sourcing and deciding to give to who they want, creating new contractors and so forth to do what they want. So the nature of the state is like that. And the PNC historically, from the past, historically, they used race as a means of maintaining a mass base within the society. Because when you imagine the split in the PDP in 1955, when both leaders were talking more or less the same language, why would people shift from the one party to go to the other? They had to create a situation to push race as a factor in order to create a mass base for the People's National Congress. And that has come up in the PNC itself. I know Gaskin made a statement about one man, Rick Knott, but I'm sure he will agree that nobody stopped him from employing Rick Knott when he employed Rick Knott in one of the public cooperation in the society. So you will always find individuals talking some nonsense about this and that. But look at the mass, look at the general figures. When we got in government, more than 95% of the public service was of one ethnic group. When we left the government, it was about 75-25%. When we talk about, I think Gaskin has been making a mistake when he talked about that the government wants who they want. Yes, maybe in some policy positions, you need that. But sweepers, cleaners, maids, chauffeur, drivers, and the hundreds of people who have been dismissed within the society. Who were they? They were fundamentally Indo-Guyanese and Amerindian. In one fell swoop, thousands of Amerindians. And many Afro-Guyanese that have been discriminated against was because they suspect them to be supporters of the People's Progressive. Let me give you one example. Look at what happened to the farmers in West Babis. 30 Afro farmers in West Babis. They had a PNC not functioning, and they run it like a private property, making money, not paying MMA their rates and taxes, not paying them for water rates, and renting the lands to people and charging them money. We decided to give the farmers who are working the land, to give the land to them, and to give landless farmers in the village the land, all Afro-Guyanese. What's the village again? Seafield in the West Babis area. All we give to Afro-Guyanese. They canceled these people lease. Why did they cancel the people lease? Because they wanted to humiliate them. They want them to go and beg them pardon for getting land from the PPP. This is heavy racism as well within this. So the discrimination comes from the nature of the state itself. and it is both political and racial discrimination within the society. There are some ministries, some of them will tell you. One minister told me the other day when I was at a funeral of Bishop George. She said, well, we will not have nobody from our ministry. That's Ministry of, they call it the Ministry of Infrastructure. And yes, I didn't hear or see any mass dismissal from there. But look at the employment that they employed. They employed a whole set of people. Many of them were dismissed for disciplinary reasons, brought back into the system because of their connections with the PNC. So, comrades, we have to look at that this is what is it took Barnum, in my view, from 1964 to 1973 to more or less consolidate his grip of power and the control of all the major institutions of the state, subvert even the courts, because you remember that they removed themselves from the Privy Council so that the last court of appeal was in Guyana itself, and he appointed the judges. So that is what we took them at that time. It took Granger 1 year to do the same thing, using his links within the remnants that are there and the links that they have created within the society. So I want to close at this point to say that we have to be careful with the direction of which we're going. The direction of which we're going is clearly undermining democracy in every way. Parking meters are being put in Georgetown, no consultation with the people. Everything that they're doing, they have absolutely no consultation with the Guyanese people. None at all. No involvement with what they call the stakeholders. Taxes are being put on people, including jackass yard, no consultation with people. The coconut man fee in people in the yard planting 4 banks of shallot, taxing them now within the system. And no consultation with no one that is taking place. So the first thing we must notice is the erosion of democracy. And then, and it'll give you some very important facts. We're going to undermine and in some areas as well. So what we have to be we went through this already in our country. We have the experience of what took place. And our country now cannot afford, because it's going to impact heavily on the economy, and it's going to impact on everyone within the society. That is our experience. If you ask me what was the most important experience we learned from the PNC before 1992, it's the fact that you can't discriminate against one set of people and say that you're going to benefit another set of people without hurting the very people you say that you discriminated for. And finally, let me make one other thing here that Gaskin said that I totally disagreed with. He said that the sugar industry is bankrupt.
Yes, it is.
The sugar industry needs investment. The sugar industry has found itself in problems because of external factors. Factor of the change in the pricing system in Europe. That is why the sugar industry is in the position that it is in. The sugar industry has made tremendous contribution to this society, far more than what is owed to the government. And the sugar industry needs investment within it, and it is not impossible to get it. When I was in India last January 2015, in our discussion with Prime Minister Modi, they gave us a soft loan to build a link road between East Bank and the east coast of the Varara Highway. The government announced that they're taking that. We negotiated to make Guyana the center for Latin America and the Caribbean with ICT. They announced that they're taking that. We negotiated a ferry to fly from Georgetown to Northwest, Mabaruma, that will cut the time to go there by less than half of what it takes right now. The government is taking that. And we negotiated a line of credit, a commitment from the government to also recapitalize the sugar industry. Recapitalize the sugar industry, and they're not taking that.
With my busy schedule, managing that time of the month could be very challenging. With Protex cotton surface pads, I'm dry and clean for 10 hours. With Protex, I feel relaxed and confident with their absorption, leak lock protection, odor control, and thermal technology. Protex, the protection, care, and comfort you can always depend on. Take advantage of the extra savings with 10 extra panty liners when you purchase 1-pack Protex pads. Be sure to ask for Protex pads. Enjoy the comfort and savings. Distributed by Superfoods. Call 223-1034 or 223-1035.
Are we being unreasonable when we accuse this government of all that it has been accused of here today? That is discriminating against people, practicing militarization of the state, victimizing people on the basis of their race and their political affiliation. If the answer is no, then I think the fault has to be ours in the People's Progressive Party, that until today, we have not had this sort of conversation at the level. And we have, because we have been engaged for 3 years in nation building, focusing on changing Guyana for all of our people. And the records are there to show how not only our country has changed, but the lives of our people, all people, have changed. But why is it that the doomsayers and the fringe elements and these so-called social activists who accuse us of racism still have a receptive ear in many quarters of our country? Why is it so in the face of this glaring evidence of progress of all of our people? And I believe we have been so engaged in nation building that we have not taken time enough to speak about the glorious record of the People's Progressive Party in nation building and moving our country forward. And so today, earlier today at a press conference I had, I said we are prepared to go through a fact-based analysis of the state of Afro-Guyanese under APNU, under the PNC, under the People's Progressive Party in the period 1992 to 2015, and the state today. And the evidence that in 1992, most of you, as Donald Ramatar said, the public service was dominated by Afro-Guyanese, and it's still dominated by Afro-Guyanese. In the 70s, servants were the middle class in this country. By 1992, they were polarized by a government when the minimum wage fell to $5 US You remember the case of nurses and doctors and other public servants having to hustle to make a living because the public service salary was adequate to make a decent life to even feed their family. That's the PNC's record with Afro-Guyanese, pauperizing the public service because they were fixed income earners. Contrast that with the situation when we left office from where we took over. Wages in the salary and salaries in the public sector have moved up in a real terms by over 600%. We have moved the public servants back into the middle class in this country. That's our record. If you look at how many Afro-Guyanese owned a piece of land in 1992, you will find at least 40,000 who own a piece of land in 2015 than in 1992. If you look at the number of vehicles owned by Afro-Guyanese in 1992 and compare that with today, then you will see hundreds of thousands of vehicles more are owned by Afro-Guyanese. If you look at black-owned businesses in Guyana, because in 1992 there was practically no business, not government, not private business. But if you look at black-owned businesses today in Guyana, from hairdressing services, taxi services, security services, computer services, contracting services, companies, supermarket services, you will see at no point in our entire history from slavery to today that Afro-Guyanese have owned businesses, and most of that growth took place in the 20 years of the People's Progressive Party. And you know why I'm mentioning this? I'm mentioning all of this because the demagogues are using this element, this accusation of discrimination without any fact-based analysis to now theoretically argue that since the PPP discriminated against Afro-Guyanese, this period is a period for correction of that discrimination. That is what they're arguing. So we need to destroy this myth, this fallacy, this propaganda that make progress under the PPP. I've only dealt with one element, but in every single area, in terms of rights, if you look at the changes to our constitution, one of the most progressive constitution in the world. We have protections, separation of power. We respected the institutions that Anil Nandalal spoke about, even when they went against the executive. They ruled against the executive ruling. The complaints before the Ethnic Relations Commission asked Edgehill. The Relations Commission investigated those complaints about higher public sector and private sector and scholarships and everything else. And when you look at the reports, you will see that there has been no against Afro-Guyanese practice by the People's Progressive Party. The reason I'm telling you all of this is that one can excuse sporadic cases of discrimination because no government can answer for every person that they put in every entity. And people often act based on their own philosophy, their own outlook on life. Might be few racist, and you can't blame every government for that. But you can definitely blame when the practice of racism starts to become institutionalized. And what we have seen now is this closed the bauxite industry in Linden. There were no other sources of employment. So what we did, at that time I was at the Ministry of Finance, we took a team under Dr. Jagan, took a team from finance. We slept in Linden. We spent several days there. We came up with an area development plan. We then applied to the European Union for a grant. We got a 12 million euro grant. We established the LEAP program to do a road into West Watuka to open up lands there. We put in place a business incubator in the center to start up new businesses. We then put in a small loan facility so that many small businesses could be established. We kept the bauxite industry open. We put in the subsidy, and then we got an investor to invest. The same thing happened in the Berbice River, but I'm not going to go into that too. How we dealt with that when Alcoa walked away. How we kept the industry alive, took it back to the government, and then reprivatized it. Because we recognized that you had to provide alternatives for people before you take the tough action. We even set up a call center. I forgot the call center. That the call center was closed 3 weeks after this government took office, and 80-something people in Linden lost their jobs. All right? The small loggers, we gave them many community development forests. Community forests, we gave them, brought the small loggers together. Today, those people can't sell their logs because there is no market for it in Aichuni and Kwakwani. I can tell you, look at their approach, as Gaskin said, they decide to close whales, but no diversification plan, no help, just chasing the people on the road. What are the 1,700 sugar workers going to do there? What are the 800 others who work with the private cane farmers do? All the people who made millions of dollars of investment would lose their job. Just contrasting these things. It's a different approach to dealing with government and people. The second thing is investments from India. This government seems to think they were going to take one loan from India. That was for the specialty hospital. They wanted not to take anything else except in that one, but was for a corrupt transaction. But not only have they not had investors from India, they've had no investor from anywhere in the world, although they argued before the elections that people were waiting to come to Guyana. And the reason is that the signals they're sending are not good to investors. The president, at the time when investors were here for Guy Expo, spoke about review of the concessions. And the people said, well, hold on a minute. When you finish reviewing it, then we'll come. Every single investment that is generating growth, only two mines, gold mines that are generating the growth now, everything else is down. What took place under the PPP. ExxonMobil came in here under the PPP. All the mining things has happened. So they are devoid of any strategy for investment, and they have an inept minister who is dealing with this. Of course, they want to demonize us, that we're telling people not to invest. But people, why would a businessman invest if every night Soku runs him down, goes into his home, sees his asset, harasses people? People, why would they invest? Or the government capriciously changes the incentive regime. You wake up one morning and the Minister of Finance changes the tax on steel, the tariff on steel. The next day, on the tax on heavy equipment. Next thing you hear, look at the requirement. Not only have they increased 140 taxes, but they made it a requirement that you had to demonstrate paying taxes the last 7 years before you get the renewal of your license. This is unconstitutional, yet they did it. They did it. What signal are they sending to investors? People are not stupid. They don't listen to Jack. They how to invest their money. They listen to their pockets. And so this is it. And first we heard, oh, it was the drug money. Drug money running the country. So All the people who built their homes, the 20,000 new homes that were built, all came from drug money. And everything else in the country came from drug money. And they're doing such a wonderful job. That's why the country is running down. They don't have a clue about economic strategy. And Friday, I will deal with that. I'm speaking at the GMA. I think those were the issues, and the imperialism kind of thing about the militarization. I didn't want to go back so far, but you're right. A lot of the features that we acquired started from the colonial era. Then Burnham replaced the colonialists, and it even got worse under Burnhamism. But the reality is that today the militarization is harming. Practice of discrimination on the basis of two grounds: race and politics becoming institutionalized. And there is a theoretical, philosophical underpinning, a justification for this. So we heard the chairman of the Revenue Authority mused about the geographic location of taxpayers or taxpaying. It was not the geographical location of taxpaying he was talking about, it was the ethnic location of taxpaying services. We have seen another employee of the government, Eric Phillips, argued that Afro-Guyanese only own 3% of the assets of the country. One person, when we discussed it at our MP meeting, said Odinga Lumumba alone owned 3%. And say 3% of the assets of our country. And he argues now that Afro-Guyanese came here before even the Amerindians, many Amerindian tribes. So that somehow the state, which has acquired the same nature of the colonial state, is responsible for correcting this historical wrong and must deal with transferal of assets to Afro-Guyanese based on this number that he called, which has not been tested. Today at my press conference, I asked, if you live in South Georgetown and you own a home, and the man in Essequibo Coast, and you're Afro-Guyanese, and the man on the Essequibo Coast, he owns 12 acres of land, because land seems to be the big issue. Land is communal lands, etc. He owns 12 acres of land on the Essequibo Coast he plans to write. If you attempt to monetize the holdings, to sell the house in the Georgetown or sell the 12 acres of land in the Essequibo Coast, you will get more money for the house in Georgetown. So when you do an assessment of ownership, it is by far way above what he's talking about, and he's a member talking about around the country and using that as the basis to push the government into enacting policies that are discriminatory. Let's look at Carl Greenwich. Carl Greenwich recently said at a conference that we discriminated against Afro-Guyanese in giving national awards. Most of you know it's not true. I didn't give national awards for several years, and when I did, I had to point out to him that from the finance sector, the 5 persons who were there, Clyde Rupchun, Khurshid Sattar, Lawrence William, Donna Yearwood, and Lennox Benjamin, 3 of them were Afro-Guyanese. But they thrive on misinformation that the PPP somehow discriminated against Afro-Ghanese, and they use this all to justify, to push the government. Look at the last activity that the president spoke at. the activity to celebrate a decade of people of African descent. And two speakers there said, Lincoln Lewis and Ms. Hines, they both said to the people who were sitting in the audience that we supported this government, and therefore the government has to meet our demands. This was not a political activity. This was an activity for Afro-Guyanese. They assumed automatically that every Afro-Guyanese in that room voted for PNC. Is this not racist to make that assumption? And nobody would say anything about that. Nobody would say that they're racist. If the PPP, by speaking out against discrimination against Indo-Guyanese, is accused of racism, then you have, I said today, that in this government, you have a bunch of racists because at sometime in the past, they have all spoken about some discrimination against Afro-Guyanese. That's the first point. The second thing is that when I say this, they forget that we also speak about the political discrimination, because two types of discrimination. Look at Carville Duncan, standing there. Look at Carville Duncan. Carville Duncan is perceived, maybe, to be supportive of the People's Progressive Party. He is before the courts now, accused of stealing $20,000 a month. That is the ridiculous nature. Facing court, criminal charges against him, based on a perception which might not be true. I don't know if Carville supports the PDP, but the perception is that if you're black and you support the PDP too, you'll get confronted. The Amerindians, the first week of this government in office, the biggest act of discrimination for the past 50 years in the Western Hemisphere took place against the Amerindians. 2,000 of them nearly were sent home. And you know what they were told? They were told that these were PYO people and PPP activists. You know what the government has done now? It has started with the litmus test of politics. Justin spoke about it. The litmus test of politics now, about who you vote for, now will determine your employment within the government. Ask anyone if the PPP in any interview required them to vote for the PPP or ever ask them who they voted for in the last elections. And then you will see the difference. And so we have absolutely no apology to make about the PPP's. If you look at the allocation, budgetary allocation, through which a government practices its policy, if you add the subsidy to Region 9 allocation, that's the region on a per capita basis that got the most money under the PPP, and it has always been supportive of AFNU. Region 10, always been supportive of the PNC. But we did not discriminate against those people, dear Guyanese too. Hines said, this government cannot be discriminating against Indo-Guyanese because look how much money it's spending in sugar. Look how much money it's spending in sugar. And I said, well, how can we be discriminating against Afro-Guyanese in the past? When in Region 10, we built a Milliers ward from scratch, from bauxite plants, to expanding streams, hospital, water treatment plant, the roads there, a whole range of secondary schools, 2 secondary schools, power plant, a new power plant went in there, and we subsidized electricity. How come with all of that spending we are racist? And you're arguing now because we spent $8 billion in sugar, $8 billion in sugar, then you can't, that you're not discriminating. The essence of the issue with sugar is the signal. And as I spoke about the theoretical underpinning, the quiet whispers about this transference. So sugar is PPP support, Indian people. So yes, we put in $8 billion in subsidy, but we can't find $1.7 billion to keep wells open. But we can write off 20 billion for DDL, and we can then subject the taxpayers to a liability of another $60 billion for that one company. Or we can pay people $1.7 billion because we don't have confidence in the appeal process. But we can't keep wells open where 25,000 people of all races, the entire West Bank, depend on that industry. It's the choices you make with the money. And so when we look at the wasteful expenditure, you can spend $1 billion on this white elephant at Durban Park. And you don't want to see it then. And $1 billion on dietary and bringing back the people's militia. But you can't keep wells open. And the 80-something billion dollars of debt. I said to the government, if we disaggregate that debt, you will see a significant part of it is long-term debt. They were taking, and if we offset that against the money, the $115 million US dollars that we got from the European Union, the debt would be significantly reduced. Gaisuco is carrying debt. Take, for example, for the cogen plant in Skeldon that supplied power to GPL at a subsidized rate. But it is on Gaisuco's book. A lot of those debts are to the GRA. They could easily be canceled. We offer to help to keep wells open. And then the point about the signal on the rice industry. The taxation policy itself, it seems, many people would say, that the majority of that urban elite who engage in the discussion, who would not wet their foot and get past the borders of Georgetown, do not understand that you have many black villages too in the rural countryside. They don't understand that the rice farmers, many of them struggle to make a living. They're not rich people. But there's this mistaken belief because the Indo-Guyanese are predominantly the business class, but that there are thousands of them who have a hard time living too in the rice industry and in the sugar industry and in the cash crop industry, as well as rural blacks and Amerindians who are facing a hard time. So their belief is that if they are predominantly in production, why don't we just charge them a bit more taxes? So the value-added tax that we had waived for heavy industry because it helps production. If you bring in a tractor, combine, a excavator, a skidder, etc., you don't pay the value-added. They surreptitiously reintroduced it. So 16% more you have to pay. And one would have wondered why if one mentioned the steel, because the steel goes to everyone, but it seems as though it's an assault on the productive sector. And the productive sector in their warped thinking is primarily Indo-Guyanese driven. It's a misguided policy. Our country is integrated. I went to the village next to Dartmouth, Westbury, and I sat in Westbury, and the guys came over from Dartmouth, and they said to me, when the PPP was there, y'all used to eat, but we used to get the crumbs. With these people, we don't even get the crumbs. So if you don't help the rice industry, the black workers who work from Dartmouth and many of the other areas with the rice farmers, etc., they too lose their jobs. I remember one day when they had a fire, when we had street protests and stuff, and we had a fire on Regent Street, and the staff was all standing outside. And I said to someone, look at Guyana. Because although the building was owned by an Indo-Guyanese, the staff looked like Guyana, like our people. You had Amerindians there, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, all losing their jobs. And this government needs to understand that they can't hurt a large section of the country without hurting everyone. The next thing about the military, I've heard things said about the military. I support our military. I believe our military has grown in professionalism from the days we took over. We never asked them to perform political tasks, and we hope they maintain the professionalism, and we'd always support our military. What we are against is not the military, but this attempt to militarize and to use methods that are not provided by our Constitution or several of our laws in the process. So I don't have a problem with a military man competing for a job too. Why? We need everybody. A military person, in fact, I had said, Roger, one time, that our soldiers retire too young. So we must ensure that when they retire, some of them retire at 45, and the senior ones at 55, I think. And I said, get another skill. I asked the chief of staff to see that people started getting another skill, because if a person finishes work at 45, you still have many, many years ahead to contribute to this country. But what we are opposed to is the process through which it's done. They just handpick these people, and half of them had no connection. They're military from abroad who had retired a long time back. Many of them don't have any skill level. You tell me Van West Charles, son-in-law, he come in to run the GWI. They used to talk about advertisements and stuff for senior position. What kind of advertisement? He's down there. He's not military. That was a digression. But similarly, you have them as cons around the country. They cannot make a contribution to the sectors in which they are placed, because many of them do not have the skill. If they had the skill, yes, fine, but they do not have in the GRA and many other agencies. So the key thing is that the People's Progressive Party is proud of its record. We are not going to be intimidated. Secondly, no amount of accusation when we speak up against political and racial discrimination against Guyanese people will cause our voices to be silenced. Because if our record of struggle is too long, we started in the colonial era, and they did not silence Chetty Jagan and the others. Today, we all must speak up, not just the leadership of the PDP, but every time you find a case of discrimination based on politics or race, you must speak out too. And never mind all the labels you get, because that's all they can do. They can label us with the hope that the labels would keep us quiet. And so your party has a long history of struggle and will continue to do so. Thank you.
I think you had a full presentation with that final presentation from the panel. What we'll do now is to open the floor for your comments, questions, suggestions. But you will do so when I recognize you. I'll recognize you when you put your hands up. I may not see all the hands at one time, but hopefully we get to all the hands. You will direct, if you have a question to a single panelist, you will direct your question directly to that person. If you have an open question for the panel, you state that. Are we on one page? Well, the floor is now open to you. And let me thank you for your patience in listening to the panelists. A great demonstration of discipline. So the floor is now open to you. I'm looking for hands.
Yeah,
So the one at the back, two at the back, please stand. Yes. Come to the intro. Stand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I would like if anyone of the panelists can shed some light with respect to all the interventions we made for Region 10, starting with the bauxite, starting with leave, etc. So any one of them can shed some light to show that we have never really discriminated against no region.
Sure.
The next comment. Go ahead.
The Roman and from Pleasant area.
Yeah.
So every day we be bombarded with questions. First they said that they just money running the country.
Yeah.
Today, after today, I received a message that covers Barjack here stop the Indian people to invest in the country. So those are coming.
Yeah.
Next, yes, comment. One, and then, yeah, come forward. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me here. Obviously, I'm a token Indian, and a token as well. The question is, the last government under the President, Donald Ramantar, made a concerted effort to go to India and attract investments. In fact, we work with over $3.2 trillion from India on a daily basis. Why has this current government not taken the chance to go to India, to attract the LOCs that are needed, to provide employment for the people here, but more importantly, to create stronger ties with one of the most world's leading economies? That's my question.
Thank you.
Comrade, go ahead, please.
All right, let's go take the
I'm happy
gentleman.
to be here this afternoon, and I want to say the speakers are good, the program is good, and we need this countrywide. And I'm going to walk with you everywhere you go, along with you.
That's cool.
We'll take one more, and then we'll go to the panelists. Yes, Comrade, go ahead.
I was waiting for you to tell us about the involvement of the imperialist nations, machinations that are taking place, and the further militarization of the Guyanese.
All right, sure.
I hope you will enlighten me.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Comrades, I first ask the opposition leader to take the first bite because we have a few things directly to him. And then we'll open up to any other panelists. And we'll be carefully observing the time of the panelists.
Yeah. Well, I think that was directed to me because I'm long-winded. But let me start with what Indra raised about what we did in Linden. I mentioned a few of the things. But it was to contrast the approach to bauxite. I will just get to those issues, Indra, by contrasting how we dealt with the bauxite industry when it was in crisis and how they're dealing with sugar. In 1992, we came into office and we found a contract to either close or restructure Lynn Mine, the bauxite industry, given to an Australian company called Minproc. They had a World Bank loan associated with that. We argued against closure, although Hoyt had left that contract. We said if we close the bauxite industry in Linden, there were no other sources of employment. So what we did, at that time I was at the Ministry of Finance, we took a team under Dr. Jagan, took a team from finance. We slept in Linden. We spent several days there. We came up with an area development plan. We then applied to the European Union for a grant. We got a 12 million euro grant. We established the LEAP program to do a road into West Watuka to open up lands there. We put in place a business incubator in the center to start up new businesses. We then put in a small loan facility so that many small businesses could be established. We kept the bauxite industry open. We put in the subsidy, and then we got an investor to invest. The same thing happened in the Berbice River, but I'm not going to go into that too. How we dealt with that when Alcoa walked away. How we kept the industry alive, took it back to the government, and then reprivatized it. Because we recognized that you had to provide alternatives for people before you take the tough action. We even set up a call center. I forgot the call center. That the call center was closed 3 weeks after this government took office, and 80-something people in Linden lost their jobs. All right? The small loggers, we gave them many community development forests. Community forests, we gave them, brought the small loggers together. Today, those people can't sell their logs because there is no market for it in Aichuni and Kwakwani. I can tell you, look at their approach. As Gaskin said, they decide to close whales, but no diversification plan, no help, just chasing the people on the road. What are the 1,700 sugar workers going to do there? What are the 800 others who work with the private cane farmers do? All the people who made millions of dollars of investment would lose their job. Just contrasting these things. It's a different approach to dealing with government and people. The second thing is investments from India. This government seems to think they were going to take one loan from India. That was for the specialty hospital. They wanted not to take anything else except in that one, but what for a corrupt transaction. But not only have they not had investors from India, they've had no investor from anywhere in the world, although they argued before the elections that people were waiting to come to Guyana. And the reason is that the signals they're sending are not good to investors. The president, at the time when investors were here for Guy Expo, spoke about review of the concessions. And the people said, well, hold on a minute. When you finish reviewing it, then we'll come. Every single investment that is generating growth, the only two mines, gold mines, that are generating the growth now, everything else is down. What took place under the PPP. ExxonMobil came in here under the PPP. All the mining things, etc. So they are devoid of any strategy for investment, and they have an inept minister who is dealing with this. Of course, they want to demonize us, that we're telling people not to invest. But people, why would a businessman invest if every night Soku runs him down, goes into his home, sees his asset, harasses people? People, why would they invest? Or the government capriciously changes the incentive regime. You wake up one morning and the Minister of Finance changes the tax on steel, the tariff on steel. The next day, on the tax on heavy equipment. Next thing you hear, look at the requirement. Not only have they increased 140 taxes, but they made it a requirement that you had to demonstrate paying taxes the last 7 years before you get the renewal of your license. This is unconstitutional, yet they did it. They did it. What signal are they sending to investors? People are not stupid. They don't listen to Jack. They know how to invest their money. They listen to their pockets. And so this is it. And first we heard, oh, it was the drug money. Drug money running the country. So all the people who build their homes, the 20,000 new homes that were built, all came from drug money. And everything else in the country came from drug money. And they're doing such a wonderful job. That's why the country is running down. They don't have a clue about economic strategy. And Friday, I will deal with that I'm speaking at the GMA. I think those were the issues, and the imperialism kind of thing about the militarization. I didn't want to go back so far, but you're right. A lot of the features that we acquired started from the colonial era. Then Burnham replaced the colonialists, and it even got worse under Burnhamism. But the reality is that today the militarization is harming